Guts.
It's Guts.
Okay, hold on a second. I gotta get my cheat sheets here. Lieutenant Gutzwiller is Lieutenant and Supervisor of the Summit County Sheriff's Office, the smart system-wide mental health assessment response team. Boy, I really messed that up. 19 years of experience in Summit County Sheriff's Office. He can talk about his expertise. He's also then taken his police work and got some counseling experience. You can talk about that a little bit. And then Andrew Bottman, which is also part of the Summit County team. And Andrew comes to you as the clinical director or clinical program manager of the Summit County Sheriff's Response Team. And when I was talking with everybody, they were real excited to be here. And we wanted to name this program Teamwork Makes the Dream Work. And then we changed it to Teamwork Makes the Co-Response Work Optimally. Because it really is about how they get along and how they connect, and that's what really makes it work. So I'm going to turn it over to Chief Hall here to moderate this group, but I want you to give everybody a round of applause ahead of time.
Okay, so just a few housekeeping things. This session is also being live streamed, and so we have about 25 folks online, and so if there is a question from one of those individuals, they just need to type it into the chat, and then we'll work it out from there. I also understand I was supposed to have 2 mics. Is that still the case where I hand both mics to any participants?
They're wired for sound.
Okay.
And you have the live mic, and then when there's questions from the audience, we use both.
Excellent. All right. I think I can handle that, so we'll see how it goes. So once again, welcome everybody. I think we're just going to start off with a question about how your program came into be. What challenges were you facing, maybe from both teams, some history about maybe some of the ups and downs, and where you are today. My hope up here is that I don't talk a lot. I like to talk. But my hope is that you guys do all the talking. And so after you hear about their programs, I'm going to open it up first just for questions and audience participation. I've got some feeder questions just in case there's crickets, but hopefully not. So I think we'll start with the Summit County team and we'll go from there.
Sure. So the Summit County SMART program, System-Wide Mental Assessment Response Team, started in 2019. We had a unique situation going on in our county where the Community Mental Health Center was remanded by the state, and we didn't have services available in our community. And our sheriff decided that it might be a good idea that we as a sheriff's office maybe go after some of those contracts to provide some of those services. And we now have a team of 20 people that provide co-response. That's a police officer riding with a clinician full-time. They go to any call through any municipality within Summit County, as long as there's a public safety tie and a mental health tie. It doesn't necessarily have to be someone that's suicidal or homicide. But if there's some level of mental health tie-in, we'll go on it. And those guys have also worked really hard to pick up some extra contracts. We do intensive case management work, so we don't just deal with people in the moment that they're in crisis. We stay with them for days, weeks, months, or years after an event, and we'll work with anybody as long as they have mental health goals that they're working on, and we'll do that freely. I think the real strength of our program, or where it really came from in the beginning, was we took a long time to look at all the different programs throughout the state, ride with a lot of those programs, take parts and pieces back for our community. And then we engaged community partners and stakeholders, and we decided to get input from the community on what kind of program they wanted. We have over 150 community partners that we connect with, and that's the system-wide part of our program. So people were talking a lot about, I've heard today them mentioning peers. They talked a lot about, that's a little too close, sorry. they were talking about mitigating some substance abuse issues or harm reduction. We have partners in each of those arenas, and so we work very closely with them. They come and visit us once a week. We go visit them once a week. We try to engage with them continuously so we have a relationship going with them. And then we can pass certain clients to the right person that fits them in our community.
What makes our program kind of different than a lot of other programs, we take a really trauma-informed care approach. What that means is our deputies and clinicians, they drive together in the same car. Our car is an unmarked vehicle. It's so unmarked that we even got rid of the government license plate because we have some nosy neighbors in our community. Also, our deputies and clinicians wear plain clothes to the call. So you'd see them in jeans and a sweatshirt, or you'd see them in jeans and a polo. The reason why we do that is mental health is not a crime. Behavioral health is not a crime. We want to make sure it's treated that way. We want to make sure that people in our community understand they could call 911 without hesitation and get behavioral health services that they need in that moment wherever they are. One of our big woohoos is since 2019 when our program started, we've been on thousands of calls since. With those thousands of calls we've been on, we've had 0 arrests and 0 uses of force. We've gone on calls with individuals with firearms. We've gone on calls where individuals are incredibly intoxicated and the whole gamut of it. But again, we found other avenues for these individuals that didn't lead to arrests or lead to any uses of force.
All right, so our program in Montrose and Delta counties has been alive for about 4 years. For the first 2 years, it was an off and on thing. We had 2 different clinicians that were assigned to the program. They both lasted approximately 6 months. So 6 months apiece. A third clinician came on when I came on in October of 2021, and that clinician lasted about 3 months. So, and I say that partly to segue into something Chief's going to talk about. But the idea is that, the program has kind of a little bit of a rough start. It's a BHA grant-based program. We run our program a little different than Summit does in that I run what's called the mercenary model. So I'm alone in my vehicle, and I've got a radio in my ear, and when there's a call that has anything to do with mental health, and that's where we're very similar, anything to do with mental health, not just suicide, I'll start heading that way, and I'll let dispatch know, hey, Baker 1 headed toward X call. And if Jordan's already there, he's kind of my liaison. We go to all these things all together. So he's sometimes on, sometimes not, but I might see him, and we do a hot brief, kind of step back from the scene. So typically there's one officer that stays with the people who are active in the call, and one officer will step aside and say, hey, here's what you got, here's why we called you, boom, let's go. And so we engage in that way. I dress just like this. This is a duty day for me, so I'll go right back on to working calls after I leave here. So this is what we look like, and that's what he looks like. So, the officers come as officers, and my car is unmarked. It does have a government plate on it. So, since about 2021, we have had 3 co-responders, and that's 2 clinicians and 1 case manager. Right now, the case manager is out there working calls. Unfortunately, our other co-responder broke his ankle recently, so he's working calls remote. So we cover 2 counties, and another difference between the Summit program and our program is I am responsible to both the county sheriff's office and to the PD at the same time. So I'm running all the channels in my ear, and if there's a call out for SO, then I'll go that way. If there's a call for PD, I'll go that way. And either one is kind of first come, first served, and we work it out. Okay?
Yeah, so you mentioned something good in the very beginning there, is that at the start of our program, we had a bit of a challenge finding proper fitment, right? Not everyone can be a cop, not everyone can be a clinician, right? You got to find the right person for your program. And so it took us a little while before we were able to find folks that are not only qualified, but we're also had a lot of buy-in into the program itself. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. Something like this requires a lot of follow-up. It requires a lot of proactive work behind it. He's managing cases like I'm managing cases. The only difference is his is mental health related, mine are criminal, right? We work really closely together as far as communication goes in our program. We've worked closely individually, but also the other officers that work have been well trained in figuring out, okay, this is how I can speak to someone. This is information that would be important for a co-responder moving forward. And they kind of work together so that way we can brief each other once he gets there. Once we ensure a scene is safe, once we figure out, okay, hey, this is time for mental health to start coming into play, he can pick up where we left off. I'm CIT certified, a lot of other officers at our department are CIT certified, and we utilize those skills to work with people in various manners to ensure that if he's stuck out in the county working on something, we can still work with them and we can still get them started down a path of success, and then he can come in and follow up later on and really do a lot of good proactive work as far as getting them solutions. It takes, we can help them for about 15 minutes to an hour, right? But a lifetime of problems can't be solved in an hour's worth of work. So utilizing him is a really good resource to not only work with these folks, but also get them in touch with other resources. I'm not necessarily familiar with all of the resources that Access Health has, that other agencies in Colorado have, even other states possibly. But he knows who to call, he knows who to get in contact with, he knows how to follow up with that. And we've seen a lot of success with folks where we end up seeing more contacts with maybe him doing a proactive, going out there, they're calling him, call for services, hey, I want to speak to Baker too. I want to speak with Drew, right? Rather than, hey, I'm suicidal and someone needs to stop me, right? So it combines a little bit of emergency response as well as a little bit of proactive work. But I think now that we've got 2 additional members of the program on the Access Health side, they're out here working. We've seen a lot of success with sort of getting everyone on board, finding the right people for the fit.
Okay, so does anyone have any questions about how these 2 agencies got their programs started? Is anyone here in the audience looking at wanting to start a program? Who do we have in the audience that is either a mental health clinicianist or law enforcement? You raise your hands. Okay. Does everyone in here that is law enforcement already have a program? Nice. Okay. So a few. Awesome. All right. So Jordan talked a little bit about FIT and maybe just a little bit of backstory on it. Montrose PD, we are famous for the chief saying, hey, we need a program. I'm no different than our former chief, and he was a visionary, and actually a little bit before 2020, we started a co-responder model, and his words were, I think this is great, this could work in our community, I think Houston is doing this, go find out and start something. That's how it started, and we started with a clinicianist, and this person definitely had their heart in the right place, but over time, and we allowed it, they started wearing body armor, they started wearing like a vest kind of thing, they were carrying a pack set on their belt, and what actually was the case is they wanted to be a police officer, and our program wasn't good at all. It was terrible, really, and so it really is about fit, and today we have an excellent individual in Drew. So I think I'm going to start the next question just with this. So for our law enforcement individuals here, did you immediately accept, hey, we have a co-responder program coming into the department? How did you integrate the co-responders into your staff of police officers, and how did you integrate them so that they were accepted as a resource and not this kind of thing over here that I'm not really sure what to do with?
Sure, that's a great question, because I think probably any place implementing a program like this, police officers are somewhat mistrusting of the fact that you're bringing a social worker into the field to do some of the work that they may have done previously. And as a police officer of many years, and It's interesting, but you get called for everything. So you kind of become an expert in mental health because you go to those types of calls all the time. And so there, and then there's also like the jurisdictional issues. We also service many police departments within our county. And so there was this web of that we had to negotiate and kind of plan through on how to successfully integrate this team to be well received by both law enforcement and the community. There's really two sides of it, or three sides, community partners as well. I did embrace it right from the get-go only because it was my program and I had to build it. And so again, I feel like I had a little bit of an edge there. I got to go to many different programs and take parts and pieces, and then I knew I had some community buy-in because I had talked to a lot of people in my community before we ever went live. And then I really had to be very selective on who I did pick at the beginning. And the first clinician I hired was just terrible.
That's me.
I got somebody right out of school, and the clinicians in the room understand that you can go to school for 6 years, and you still have to spend 2 years under the supervision of another clinician before you can ever write a mental health hold on your own. Cops, we go to school for 20 weeks, and then we can write a hold. It's just a really odd piece or part of the way that works. But I was really lucky to get a kid right out of school and we kind of touched on this a little bit, it takes the right person. I think if you have somebody that's working in an office, 40 hours a week, and then you try to take that person and put them on grave shift and feed them 7-Eleven coffee and send them to the worst calls in the world with very intoxicated people, they're probably not going to like that very much. But a young kid right out of school, Andrew was really into it, and there are special clinicians out there to do this kind of work and do it very well. And you just got to find those people. So finding those people was very important to us in the beginning, and I found an excellent police officer that was well respected in our agencies. And then I just really worked really hard, and I'm not a PR person, but I knew I had to do a lot of that work, so I just really got out there and met up with as many people as I could meet. I did as many presentations as I could do. I talked to any and everyone that would talk to me, and kind of shared our vision and got some buy-in. And then interestingly enough, those guys went out there and busted their tail. And within weeks, as you mentioned, the police officers, they really just were like, holy geez, somebody's going to come in and do these hard calls for me? This is awesome. They couldn't call them fast enough. The community partners really started to like the work that we were doing. We don't have a walk-in center in Summit County, so every single police interaction that was dealing with a suicidal person, as soon as they mentioned the word suicide, we took them to the hospital. That's what we did. What you don't probably realize is that person then gets a $30,000 hospital bill right after they get out of crisis. And so introducing co-responder, they were able to stabilize those people in place and save them a tremendous amount of money, and save our community a tremendous amount of money, and free up first responders in every aspect, police, police, fire, and EMS. And so they started to see the value in that, and it really is a brand that you build over time, and trust was built, and now I don't think that our community would do without us. Oh, God, one thing. What's that? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think initially there's a little apprehension when it comes to introducing kind of an outsider, right? We deal with a lot of different people. We deal with a lot of tough things, and we kind of get in this calloused mindset of, you know what, I'm the one that's going to fix it. It's going to be me that fixes it. But introducing someone that is not only capable, but someone who is able to interact with other officers very well, interact with the community well, have good results in their work, I think is key in really showing law enforcement that, hey, these guys are good and they can do good things, and this is well worth the investment in the time. This is well worth the investment in money. Is well worth the investment in your personal relationship with them. I think some things that do kind of help us with this is, so Drew hangs out at the office. He has his own little office here right next to the patrol room. And so constantly we're interacting with him, whether we're talking about just minor things here and there, whether we're talking about cases we're working, whether we're following up with maybe someone that we helped previously and we're checking in saying, hey, you know, how they're doing. Building a dialogue with someone who you're working with is key to building that relationship at work. And then seeing the success out in the field, I think really speaks volumes. When an officer can see someone come in here and actually really work hard and get some good results, where someone maybe we've been dealing with frequently for a very long time, all of a sudden the frequency of calls for service start going down for that individual because we see him going out there and talking to them proactively. So I think it's a good balance between not just finding the right person for the work, but also, you know, integrating them as part of your staff and making sure that they're part of the department. You know, he does work for Axis, right? He does work for a different company, but we treat him as if he's one of us. You know, we constantly work together, we constantly spend time together, and I think that's key to breaking down that barrier, that natural barrier that's going to be there between, you know, introducing someone new to a department, especially someone who, you know, is taking a very unique role. So it's not easy to begin with. Again, we went through a few folks before we finally found some good fits, but I think now that we've got the formula down, I think it's good to keep moving forward with the right people. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Andrew, are you employed with the county, I mean, under the sheriff's office, or who actually pays you, I guess?
Yeah, I'm more than happy to speak to that. It comes out of his paycheck. No. So I am actually an employee of the Sheriff's Office, Summit County Sheriff's Office. I'm a sworn member of the Sheriff's Office. So is our entire staff. All 20 of our clinicians and case managers are all sworn members of the Sheriff's Office. The reason why we did that is because we didn't want to have to deal with a third party and have kind of a miscommunication and do wonderful cross-training. Because of that, I'm able to go to our reality-based trainings that law enforcement does with patrol. I got to learn that I can't call it playing, and I had to call it training. But at those trainings, we get to do really unique cross-training. For example, in my master's program, I never learned where to stand in front of a door when you're going to be knocking on a door. Never came up in class. Well, that's basic officer safety. And so we get to do that really neat cross-training with that. And on the same end of that, our deputies that are with our team, they didn't know the difference between bipolar 1 and bipolar 2. Now they do. And so we really get to offer each other those unique parts of it. So we're all under the same house. We ride together on the calls. So we're all in the car together. We spend about 40 hours a week with our partner. So the clinician and deputy are in a car for so long, they basically become family. Anything else?
That's true.
Cool.
That comes out of your paycheck.
It comes out of my paycheck.
Any other questions?
We have an online question.
Okay.
Online question here was submitted. How does this type of program affect your budget? And are you able to? What are the strategies for ongoing funding, for acquiring ongoing funding?
Just from the Montrose side, I'd probably answer, if that's okay with you, Jordan, the budget question.
Yeah, he's the money guy.
It actually doesn't affect our budget too much. Really, mental health co-response is about the partnership, and at least in Montrose, and I'll hand the mic over, we have Access Health here in Montrose, and they saw the need all the way back in 2016, and so they fully fund the salaries of the 2 mental health co-responders in our program. Having said that, this has become such an incredible program for us that, and I have a council member in the room, so I need to watch what I say, but this has become such a successful program that if something happened and suddenly there was, Access came in and said we couldn't do this anymore, we would figure out a way to fund clinicianists within the city of Montrose. It is that important to us. But it started with the partnership and with the, actually the grant funding that Access pursued. But I'll turn it over to you guys real quick if you have a different budget.
He's the money guy.
Yeah.
Our program is 100% grant funded, and we basically had to go hat in hand to a great many grantors to kind of build that. And we build it one team at a time. We're funded by the Office of Behavioral Health Administration, Rocky Mountain Health Plans, that's an insurance company. Strong Futures, they not only fund a team, but they buy 3 appointments a day. Whether we use them or not, we can immediately shift people into treatment. And then we also have a new grant. It's from Senate Bill 196 and the Multi-Jurisdictional Crime Prevention Program. Each funds a part or piece of our program. It is kind of a challenge. We had a DOLA grant our first year that funded a team. The second year, as we went to recontract with them, from $380,000 a year to $54,000 a year, and they also changed the deliverables so that we couldn't use that money for a co-response. So there always is like this scramble. It's very complicated to weave all that together if you're going to go after a completely grant-funded program. I also believe that our community would 100% fund us if that were the case, but we've found that these grants exist for a reason. These programs are very important. They're funded by the state for a number of reasons, and if the money's out there, we're going to go after it. There's also a lot of strength in going after grant-based programming because you get a grant administrator from the Behavioral Health Administration, let's say. You meet with that person once a month, and then they also have these groups. So you meet up with every co-responder team in the state once a month, and you guys get to talk about, pressing issues, case law, all of those things that affect a multitude of teams. So it really keeps you in the know and keeps your program cutting edge, I think. Andrew?
Yeah. One of the nifty things about being grant funded is we have to work on statistical analysis to prove the effectiveness of our program. And I actually think that has become a real big benefit for our program because we're then able to actually analyze the numbers and see how effective we are. If it wasn't for grant funding, we wouldn't know that 95% of our calls are stabilized in place. We could keep people in the community. We also wouldn't have known that an average call in our community response would be about $33,000, where our response is $1,100, including 6 free sessions of therapy afterwards. All of these things wouldn't have been known if we weren't grant funded. So that really actually, for us in the beginning, seemed like a pain, and at the end became a huge benefit.
Any more questions?
Come on, yeah.
We'll start here and then we'll work our way back.
I'm an elected district attorney, and we deal with victims of crime, especially, very frequently. I wonder how, when you're going out on these calls and you're clearly interacting with someone that may have mental health issues, but they've also committed a crime, or maybe there's a victim of that crime, how do you navigate those variables and try to reach a just outcome?
Yeah. You actually stole my next question. That's awesome. So I'm going to start with Drew on this one.
So, I mean, we have that little in brief that we hit when I show up. And so that's our point of discussion about, hey, what's going on here? And one of the things that we discuss is, well, what legal, restrictions or constrictions do we have? What has to be done? Is this person going 95 right now? Like, that's already a done deal. And so, that's important to know up front. Sometimes if that person is a mandated arrest, then yeah, I'll still talk to them. We'll set something up for when they get out. But there are certain things that just have to be done, and so that's part of it. And I think being involved with law enforcement, that's part of what we have to accept. We also we're there to help, and we're there to help change a pattern of recidivism if there is one. And so that follow-up immediately after any kind of mandatory jail time is really important. And so My objective is to get every person that we contact, if he sees fit to say, hey, talk to this person, it's my job for him never have to deal with them again. That's success defined in a nutshell, is if I can get that person off of PD's plate, I consider that a victory. If they have to serve some time in the meantime, then we try to vector them toward the right help in wherever they end up. If it's in jail, and I'm working with a guy in jail today. So that's still a solution. So.
Yeah, I think it's certainly a balance that we have to find when responding to something like that. Yes, we want to help our mental health subject, right? That's overall goal, right? But we also owe a certain service to our victims as well. And so finding that balance between the two is where we're going to find our most success. It's really kind of a case-by-case basis. I've attended conferences where they've talked about, the morality of it, about, okay, where on the line do we fall and what actions do we have to take, what actions can we maybe mitigate later on, that kind of stuff. And really what it comes down to is it's case-by-case basis. In the state of Colorado, we have mandatory arrests, right? And so if someone commits an act that constitutes a mandatory arrest, there's no getting around it. We have to make that arrest. But Drew really drove the point home of not just that initial interaction, but follow-up interactions moving forward. I think in the past it was more of a, okay, we handle it now and then we forget it, then we got to deal with it later on. But the mindset that we're utilizing now is something where not only do we interact with it now and we handle what we have to handle right now, but we also utilize our other resources, our co-responders, coordination with Access Health Systems, coordination with other resources, maybe throughout the state, to ensure that this person is getting help even after the fact. Because yes, they may be in a state of crisis when they committed this crime, and yes, we addressed it in the best way we possibly could, but it didn't fix the overall problem. And so, yes, we find success when we are no longer responding to calls for service for an individual, because they're getting the help that prevents them from committing those crimes or prevents them from getting in those situations. So we do have a duty as far as law enforcement to act, but it doesn't mean that we can't do our best to try and balance helping our subject as well as enforcing the law.
Yeah, just to clarify, you're wondering more about like the victim of the crime and how we go about helping that. Is that correct?
Interaction with the victims, and how do you manage that interaction?
Totally. So one of the great examples for us would be like a domestic violence call. Domestic violence calls in the state of Colorado is a must arrest. So on a call like that, our team would wait before we actually go on scene. The reason why we would wait is we don't want the individual getting arrested to associate our team with their arrest, because then they're going to associate mental health with their arrest. And that's just not productive. So with the individual like that, we would wait until they are taken into custody. We'd meet with them in the jail, try to provide them services. We have a sister program in the jail that would continue that. And then we would also then go talk to the victim separately and provide them with services and de-escalation. Another reason why we wait until that individual is taken into custody is we don't want that victim to again associate us with the connection to their perpetrator, right? We don't want them to be like, you were just talking to my perpetrator and now you're talking to me. You are not someone I can trust. And because of that, we want to keep that separation so that they all can trust us and we can all provide them services.
We also see the family unit as our client, not just the person that might be experiencing a mental health event. So we will offer services to the victim the same as we would offer to the person. I think an interesting piece or part of that, there are victims advocates. We can make those connections. But a lot of times, a person that's in a home, a family member that commits a crime, something like that, they want to see that person get help. And you see a lot of frustration around this because people are just banging their head against their wall to get their loved one help. And the justice system very seldom, if ever, gets that person help. So we can, on that victim's behalf, help them complete a victim impact statement. We can talk about diversion. We can even talk with our district attorney about sentencing enhancements that focus on mental health treatment instead of jail time. And that's been pretty effective in dealing with some victims in our jurisdiction and also getting people help. And some people may not want to get help. This is one of those few times when you can make them get help through the court system. Bridges program and a number of others. But again, that's part of that community partnership where we actually do go talk to our district attorney. We have already set up relationships on how to do that. It's not something that just happens easily. It takes a little bit of setup, but we've seen, and I know you guys mentioned like watching the recidivism of a client dropping to zero. Some of our most acute clients, people that we dealt with every single day of the year. We got them into programs like that, and you can see the recidivism just plummet.
Back to the statistics. Our recidivism rate for our program for individuals with violent crimes in 2022 was 8.5%, which is about 1/10 the national average.
That's great. All right, let me come here to the back of the room for this question.
We've gotten up and walked.
Good.
You talked a lot about your grant funding streams that were coming in. Do you find that that is really adequate to really retain and attract the clinician workforce? You're nodding yes already. So I don't know. We've experienced this as a challenge in the Front Range.
Yeah.
Start over here and pass the mic on down.
Yeah. So for crisis clinicians, they have an average work expectancy is 1 year. That's average length. As you all know, people in hiring, that's really difficult to get clinicians. One of the incentives of our program that we've learned is one, providing free supervision for them. So that really helps bring in clinicians, because if you can tell them that you're going to give them free supervision for 2 years, wonderful. There's also federal programs your program can apply for to help with loan forgiveness up to $100,000. That is another huge incentive. Also, we learned just finding the right fit, right? In interviews, we do get asked all the time, well, if you guys lose your grant, am I still going to have a job? The answer is yes. We've spoken with our county commissioners. Our program's going to be here whether there's grants or not. So those are really our keys for getting clinicians on board. Another big one is taking them on ride-alongs. You cannot imagine how many faces light up when they're clinicians just out of school, speaking from personal experience, and you get to go into a cop car and go code. You're like, this is the coolest thing ever. I thought I'd be sitting behind a desk all day. And so that's how we learned really to help with our retention, as well as doing kind of wellness things for our team. With that burnout rate being 1 year, being able to keep a team longer, we found to be more effective than just turning over new staff. To do that, we do a lot of programs in-house. We offer support to them, whether they want to go see a therapist themselves, whether that's instead of having a team meeting, we do a team bonding exercise and all get pizza and go see a movie when one team watches the field. We do things like that just to keep everyone retention.
Being the finance guy, I have fought really hard to pay our people well, and I've really made our budgets, I've forced our budgets to do that. So it ate up a lot of our operating costs, but I've switched a lot of the operating costs into salaries. And luckily the county has kind of covered a lot of our operating expenses. And we always, whenever our police officers, we're working really hard to get them raises, we're also doing the same thing for our civilian staff. It's a very important point to us.
I'd say money-wise, cost of living versus paycheck for a clinician is probably the biggest challenge in attracting a new clinician to this area. We don't have a master's level clinician producing program on this side of the mountains. So clinicians that are already resident here are attending school remote or have some intention of moving here. Typically, if they can afford to move here, they have relatives here or something like that. The idea of affording a house right now in this area on a beginning clinician's salary is non-existent. So there is a USDA grant out there that supports critical members of the community in rural areas. So that is one thing we've tried to offer out to folks as a way to kind of mitigate some of the stressors of affording housing in the area. But we haven't had a whole lot of success yet. Frankly, our case manager is kind of a grow your own for us. He is actually active in his master's program right now and we expect him to graduate in approximately 14 months. And so we will transition him from the case management level to the beginning clinician level and get him his hours from there. So that's kind of our approach, is grow your own from within, and that way we can offer something that's affordable for our program, but also makes it so they can grow into a higher level of salary. Got anything? No. All right.
Next question.
So you talked about the success of your program, gentlemen on the right, or I guess your left. But so what are your alternative responses? Because you can't talk down everyone. You said you had no arrests and escalations. So what are the alternative responses when that doesn't work out?
Yeah, so our program, like I said, has a 95% stabilization rate. What that means is 95% of the time, we can keep the individual in the community by getting them connected with community resources, such as Dana's program over there, and many others to help them get what they need to be better off. A lot of people don't benefit from being put on a 72-hour hold, being taken out of their community, having a tremendous amount of hospital bills to pay, and then come back in the same situation. We developed kind of a lethal means restriction kits. So just kind of a side note, in the UK, they went from having drugs being in bottles to blister packs, and they found that to be the #1 suicide prevention that they did for their entire country. We've taken that model and used it in our program to every degree of it, from telling individuals who are telling us they're going to shoot themselves with a gun, to disassembling their firearm, placing the bullets upstairs and the gun downstairs with our business card taped to it. We've had those individuals call us in tears, saying they just went and got their gun and the bullets and they need someone to talk. Now, for those 5% of calls that we can't stabilize in place, because safety is paramount, and unfortunately, not all of them can be stabilized. Those 5%, we try to directly admit them to treatment and to a higher level of care. In Summit County, we have no inpatient, no ATU, no CSU unit. What that means is we're looking at going to the Front Range or Grand Junction for treatment. When someone's placed on a 72-hour hold in our community, they usually go to the hospital, where they sit there on average for 18 hours in a room, in scrubs, getting no treatment. Honestly, that's traumatizing. I think that would make anyone's mental health concerns much worse. Because of that, we do a direct admission with our team. So in the field, we'll do that same assessment they'll do at the hospital, and we'll drive them down to a Front Range inpatient or ATU unit and get them treatment there. We save them that hospital bill, we save them that over $50,000 EMS ride, and then what we do is a reentry program back into the community. So when individuals are coming back into the community, that's one of the most dangerous times. Statistically, that's when they're more likely to die of suicide. And because of that, we want to do a reentry program where they're connected with resources. They have a therapy set up, they have our information, and we can help build that support so they're not coming back in the same situation they left. So if that answers your question with that 5% of the other times, that's what we really do. The rest we're able to de-escalate, do a safety plan with, lethal means restriction kits, and get set up with case management and services.
There are like a few times when somebody has to go to the hospital, like if they've attempted an overdose and there's a medical concern or something like that, and we can still place mental health holds that way too. Andrew mentioned the reentry plan. We actually go there and get them. So we'll take them anywhere in the state, and we'll also go there and get them and bring them back. And then whenever they're coming back into the community with us, we have a case manager with us that sets up those plans as they're driving back.
Because of those reentries, we see really low recidivism in the program, because then they're using us before using 911. For example, we have individuals that would call about 60 times a month, down to calling 0 and sober for over 120 days. And that's because we do that reentry.
So very similar. We do have a crisis walk-in center in the community. There are times when there is a little bit of friction between what on the law enforcement side would be desired outcome and what they can offer. Certain levels of intoxication, certain levels of aggressiveness, things like that, they can't handle. And so some people do get bounced over to the hospital. The thing that is kind of the invisible service that our crisis walk-in center provides is something that they do as well. But the idea that when I'm working with somebody, if I send that signal to the crisis walk-in center that, hey, this person needs placement, they immediately start working placement. So they're kind of part of the team, even though they're not co-responders. And that's how we extend the fact that we have 3, and we don't even have 24/7 coverage to get to the point where we get kind of better service out of just 3 people. And so that, I think, is one of the advantages we have, is that we do have that partnership, and that's another part of Access. So it's an in-house phone call for me. I just call over there to the front desk and say, hey, I'm going to need placement. And they say, all right, as soon as med clearance is done, we'll have you something. And so that's a process that really helps us. And I think it mirrors your ability, but you do it in-house and we do it kind of partnered.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think utilizing the coordination between our department and Access and the co-responder program really allows us to find ulterior options instead of just, hey, this person said that he wanted to kill himself, and so I don't really know much about mental health, but sounds like enough for a 72, and take him to the hospital, right? Utilizing all these resources that we now have and we've established, we're able to encourage other options. There are some times when you cannot, right? There's times when either you have to make an arrest or they have to go to the hospital due to maybe an overdose, maybe due to the level of care that's required to assist that person exceeds what the walk-in center could provide. So we may do a direct transport to the hospital as well. But there's many times where we've been on scene together, we've worked together, and I'll be interacting with an individual who needs help and needs placement, and he's on the phone in the other room making those things happen. Calling various placement centers, coordinating with Access Health, walk-in center, the hospital even. He's making all sorts of phone calls while I'm interacting with that individual. So it is a partnership that really allows us to succeed when finding alternative options to just simply putting someone on a hold, all right, on to the next call. So I think it's not necessarily that our co-response program handles everything just in one little in-house area. It's the fact that we all coordinate together to find the best route to success.
All right, we have about 10 minutes left. I think we have time maybe for one more question. Ma'am, did you have a question?
I was going to ask a two-part, but you can answer one or the other. I was wondering if you had differences that you find in receptivity for women when you approach women, since you're all gentlemen, and also if you offer bilingual or other services. And the second part is, I know Colorado's a high tourism state, especially Summit County. So with the follow-up piece, how do you handle that with people that aren't residents?
That's a multi-part question, so we'll try to be quick.
Yeah. Yeah, so certain individuals aren't necessarily going to be comfortable with us right off the bat, whether that's a preconceived notion of their experience with law enforcement, whether that's a gender identity kind of thing, whether that's maybe a past experience they've had with a clinician or a member of law enforcement. And so we usually do our best to set the standard right off the bat with our interaction with them. The way we introduce ourselves, the way we communicate with them is really key to setting the tone for the remainder of the interaction. And so maybe someone who initially has an apprehension towards interacting with men, you sit with Drew for 5 minutes, he's gonna be your best friend, right? You're gonna tell him anything and everything. But we do have female officers that work with us as well that are CIT certified, that do work in mental health, or at least trained in mental health. And so we can utilize them as well if they're on shift to come and speak with an individual. We coordinate with other departments in the area as well. So like the Montrose County Sheriff's Office, if they have a female deputy that may be able to de-escalate and communicate with this individual a little bit better, we'll do so. As far as multilingual interactions, if we don't have someone who could act as an interpreter, we will use an interpreter line. It's kind of a pain, and you lose a lot of personality when you're using an interpreter for something like that. But we do partner with other agencies like the Montrose County Sheriff's Office and utilize their deputies who are, excellent law enforcement officers, but they are bilingual as well. And so with a large Hispanic community here, utilizing those guys to assist us, we have staff at the police department that are bilingual as well, and we can utilize them as well. And then, of course, Access is always looking for more members who are multilingual as well. But I think he could probably speak better as to how they utilize various services to coordinate with folks under that.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head as far as our deficiency goes. Language, especially being able to speak Spanish, is something we are missing, and it is a requirement. I'm studying as hard as I can to learn, honestly, every day. And so, I've gotten to the point where I can listen and know what a person is saying when they're speaking either to me or to somebody else, and I can respond kinda. And that's not good enough. We owe a better answer than that. We have folks who speak Spanish within Axis, and to answer the gender question, yeah, we have female officers, and that has been a tremendous help. But we also have females at the crisis center, and so if that is what is required, then we'll get that person in contact with somebody that suits exactly what makes them feel comfortable, and that's the best I can do right now. So we have hired we've had female co-responders in the past, and unfortunately they were ones that just didn't work out.
So Guts and I are not a good representation of our team. A majority of our team is female. Guts and I do not represent the majority. With that being said, each co-responder pair has one individual identifying as male, one individual identifying as female. We also have members of our team that are gender non-binary as well. We do extensive training on just kind of cultural competency. Our area has a large Spanish-speaking population. It has a lot of monolingual Spanish-speaking individuals. And so a lot of things we do to gain trust with that community is going to community events that really interest those individuals so they know us not just as co-responders, but as Andrew and Daric. Whether that's us going to cooking classes or salsa dancing, we'll be there in the community to build that trust. And yes, we do have Spanish-speaking members of our team. In terms of the tourism question, that's a great one. Summit County, if you guys don't know, has a ton of tourists. What we do to help with that individual group is we can't provide them our intensive case management because they're not in our community. Our intensive case management is for individuals who either live in Summit County, work in Summit County, or have a tie here. However, we could still be advocates for them and help them in the community they're going back to. So when we deal with an individual in the field, we do a 24 and 48-hour follow-up with them. During that time between the follow-ups, we let our case managers know what town they're going back to, whether that's going back to Houston, to Chicago, Illinois. Our team will then call local resources in their community, find a list of partners that can help them, and then give them that list. Because, although they're not in our community, they're going back to another community, and they're still going to be suffering if they're not getting that connection. So we try to advocate for them and get them connected. We don't always hear back from them afterwards because they're back home, but we do try to get them connected on the surface of it. Is that, yeah, cool.
Okay. I'm going to actually take the final question here real quick. It's a speed round. You each get 60 seconds to answer this. What is next for mental health co-response? It's kind of like a hard one. So,
Guts and I are both laughing because I've told him multiple times I want our team to grow and grow and grow, to have more members of the co-response than there are going to be individuals on patrol. That's not realistic, but it's my goal. I do think the future of co-response is that every police department, every municipality will have access to behavioral health specialists in the field in the moment of the time. Mental health isn't a crime, and just like you could call 911 and get medical help, legal help, you should also be able to call 911 and get mental help.
I really think that one of the most powerful things in our team is the case management component and those connections, and just continuing to build out partnerships that are beneficial to the people that need those. We're also working really hard to come up with a client fund so that we can buy medication for people or things they might need, which we found repeatedly in a lot of crisis contacts is needed, and grant funding doesn't cover those types of things. So I think continuing to build out our case management program. We are also looking at a canine therapy dog, which has some good points and bad, but I think it really does help us connect with certain clients. And we've used it to some degree of success in the past that I think is next for us.
I think co-response is the forefront of mental health. It's where the rubber meets the road. And I think that a ubiquitous presentation of co-response across the nation is critical. I think it should take priority over in-clinic mental health. It is the point where, we're making a difference. And we're finding people who are disenfranchised from the mental health system as we know it or as we knew it 10 years ago. And so this is the cutting edge, and this is where we need to put the money.
Yeah, I think expansion is certainly where this program needs to go. We've got 3 co-responders working with us right now that covers our entire county, which goes all the way to Utah, and Delta, right? We've got 3 people. It's not 24-hour coverage. That doesn't mean that, hey, folks are only going to need help once those guys are working, right? No, they're going to need help all hours of the night. They're going to need help any day of the week. You can experience crisis at any point in time. And so I think expansion of the program is where we've been looking and where we've been working hard to achieve. So if any of you speak Spanish and want to work for our mental health co-response program, go on ahead and apply. But yeah, no, I think expansion is the way to go. And I see that, it's kind of a popular term, de-escalation and co-response, everything like that, and it's really catching on across the nation. But rather than just kind of a political thing to say that, we're trying something different, I see the tremendous success of it in our community, and I understand that that's going to expand to every other community. It just takes time and a lot of work.
So I'd just like to close real quick. You hear all these gentlemen up here speak and how well-spoken they are, but there's something else that you're hearing in their voice. It's the calling that they have for this profession. It's not just a career for them. You can hear it in what they're saying. Their hearts are in it. And that really comes down to that fit and finding that special person who's willing to answer that call for those people in our communities that are in crisis. So I'd just like to give these gentlemen a round of applause. I think they've done a great job.
If anyone wants to do a ride along in Summit County, keep our business cards up here. Come
Hey, stop hustling. Okay, we have a 15-minute break, and then we're going to come back here with the final session, which is return to the community, re-entry best practices. So anyway, another round of applause for our co-responder guys. Thank you.